We've been hearing a lot of things that make sense from Bill Maher lately. And this just happened on one of his most recent episodes of his broadcast on HBO. And he had friend of yours, longtime friend, Jared Moskowitz. But let's go ahead and play bite one from Bill Maher just a couple days ago on Real Talk.
It seemed like the entire Republican establishment lined up against this. I'm not sure you could say that about the Democratic establishment. I mean, Ted Cruz, who we've had on this show, and I certainly have had my differences, but I'm glad to talk to everybody on this show. He was very good on this. He said, the danger I want to highlight tonight is anti-Semitism. In the last 6 months, I've seen it on the rise in a way I've never seen it before on the right. Here's the interesting thing I thought he said. He said about a decade ago, anti-Semitism began rising on the left and the Democratic Party did nothing. And in the decade that followed, it has consumed the Democratic Party. I'm not so sure he's not right about that. I'm not so sure the Democratic politicians are more afraid to challenge their left, who think Hamas is terrific, than the Republicans are.
But Jordan, that's what we're seeing. And we're actually at a moment when this is an important conversation, because on the right, you're starting to see, not just in the shadows anymore, but it to creep up in the mainstream like it did, as Bill Maher references, a decade ago in the left. And we know the playbook of the anti-Semites if they have their way.
There's two reasons why, for most of our audience, to care about this. One, there is obviously the Christian connection to Israel, and the fact that the Israeli government, unlike those in the past, protect Christian holy sites from destruction. We know what would happen if Islamic radicals took control of Jerusalem. Our holy sites, our ability to go on Christian pilgrimage and to walk the same steps as Jesus Christ would no longer exist. It would be destroyed, just like we've seen Al-Qaeda do it. And we've seen those churches destroyed by ISIS throughout Syria and in the Levant. Also, a secondary part, of course, so that's your faith. Secondary part, take your faith out of it. The United States has to have an ally in the most turbulent part of the world that understands Western values, that is an actual democratic society. And that's what Israel is. So you don't have to like all of Israel's politicians. You don't have to like that. That's different than saying, well, Israel means Jews. That means Jews in America too, and Jews cause all the problems in the wars, though I don't exactly know how you make those connections. It's such a small group of people. When you look at the world and you look at how many Muslims there are, how many Christians there are, and then to how many Jews, I think it's like 15 million in the entire world. There's over 1 billion Protestants, over 1 billion Catholics, over more than that, I think more Muslims, if you separate Catholics and Protestants out, are the largest single group. So, I mean, in the billions number. And you're talking about, you're going to blame all of your problems on 15 million people in the entire world, 7 million of which live in a very tiny country so that they can have their own homeland, that you don't have to be worried about the majority government saying one day, whether they're on the right or the left, we don't want you here anymore.
That's right. And let's go ahead and play Congressman Jared Moskowitz comments. He's from Florida, and this is his response to where Bill Maher had said, I think it's interesting what Ted Cruz has to say, that I'm seeing all of this anti-Semitism in the right, and that the Democrat Party has already been infiltrated with it. Let's go ahead and play bite 4 from Jared Moskowitz.
I agree 100% with Ted Cruz.
Wow.
Okay, the difference is they have hindsight. Right? They saw what happened to us, and our party has been consumed by it. Like, people would say, look, you could be anti-Zionist without being anti-Semitic, and I would say theoretically you could. They're just not. When you're holding signs on college campuses saying go back to Poland, that doesn't sound like anything to do with Israel. When you see a Jewish student walking on campus, you don't know that he's a Netanyahu supporter, but they were surrounding him because he had a Jewish star. Right? And so this has consumed us, and it is dividing us in elections. It is run through the whole party. We have tried to not talk about it. We've tried to tamp it down, but it is everywhere. It is moving swiftly.
He said, we've tried not to talk about it. We've tried to tamp it down, but it's moving everywhere and it's moving swiftly. I want to point out a problem right now with what's going on in conservative America. Yesterday, when we talked about the left pushing back against Chuck Schumer and saying he should resign.
Which most of our audience would have no say in because they're not on the left.
Exactly. We had more than double the viewership. When we're talking about this issue, and we see this all the time on YouTube, Rumble, the viewership is like half.
Right.
We're not going to stop talking about it because we know this is important and this is a fight that's going on within the conservative sphere right now, and we have to push back. But it's very telling that there are people that either don't want to talk about it, so they won't watch it, or there are people that disagree, so they turn it off. And that's why we can't stop confronting this, because you see other conservative institutions that are imploding, that are struggling right now because of this very debate. And it shouldn't even be a debate going on within conservative ideology.
No, the idea that, free speech is speech and awful can be lawful doesn't mean you have to accept it. Doesn't mean you have to say, well, just because they have a right to say it, they're right. It doesn't mean they're right or correct. Just because it's not illegal to say something doesn't mean what you're saying is even accurate. It doesn't mean what you're saying is something that should be accepted or widely even, I think, like even going down that path. And of course, then you're steps away from also encouraging violence when people hear these kind of things. I have to tell people this first, just because I have a personal relationship with Jared that's not just politics. I'm not going to get into great detail about what he shared with me, but please pray for his family for making statements like he did, that Ted Cruz is right, that there's a serious problem on the right and the left didn't deal with it quick enough. And as Jared said, on the right, we have an opportunity to deal with this and not just be silent and not just be quiet and then not end up with mayors of New York City who are, so radical, who started the groups that are the most radical anti-Jewish groups on campus, and he created one. I mean, the Students for Justice in Palestine. And the idea, again, as a Democrat congressman, he is facing very real threats for the one issue that used to unite Republicans and Democrats was that we have to have a strong ally in the Middle East so that we don't have to fight every battle in the Middle East that can be on the tip of the spear against terrorism. And that's what Israel has always been. It's also been a strategic partner with our military in testing new devices to protect U.S. troops, like the Iron Dome and these systems. They're deployed first in Israel to see if they can be deployed on the battlefield or even in your hometown to protect you and protect your family. And Israel is able to actually deploy them in real time, live fire from enemies. They've had to respond to Iran. And by the way, President Trump, because he's got people around him who are solid people, like Marco Rubio and others, has not, this is not, anytime those people have gotten near him, he has pushed them away. That's, he's been a strong ally of Israel. So I want to make that clear. Where we're seeing this as an issue is in younger staffers in Washington, D.C., on the Republican side.
Right.
On the Democrat side, it's their elected officials. So that's what Jared was saying. And on the Democrat side, it's the people who have actually been elected to office. That's a much bigger problem because that's harder to deal with.
Right.
When you know that you've got young people who are interested in the country, they want to work in Washington, they want to work in politics, we have to be able to get the message to them that, one, racism is wrong. And I don't care what your faith is or your politics are. And there's different ways, again, to combat it. But the best way to combat it is in your communities. It's not the government having to do everything. It's communities having to do it. And to say, again, we have acknowledge that you have these issues and then try to understand why. Is it really just because some kid is, interesting to listen to online? Because if that's all it takes to turn people into anti-Semites in the United States of America, then you realize how serious the problem is. And it's one we can't ignore, that if we don't talk about, the Republican Party will be a party that you'll be uncomfortable with as well. And you know what? The left, they love this. The left loves that their leaders are now able to espouse, from the river to the sea, which means destroying Israel in Congress, and that on the right, on the farthest right in kind of the United States political system, and I mean elected right. I don't mean far right like radical groups who don't have any representation in Washington. I mean the Republican Party, that these young staffers are starting to agree with them on that. Well, they think this is wonderful because you can take that issue that used to unite Washington and say we must have this strong ally and say, you know what? Let's question Tucker Carlson said, what has Israel ever done for the United States of America? What is Israel? They are literally the testing ground for protecting our military. Their intelligence, again, on Islamic terrorism that they have been fighting since their existence. They don't ask us to come and fight their battles, if you notice, like so many other countries do. And yet we focus all of this time on, again, 15 million people around the world, 7 million in Israel, which, by the way, 20% of the population there are Arab Muslims who love living there and do not want to live in Gaza or the West Bank or even in the UAE.